right, good morning. Good morning. My name's Coleman Hemp. Thank you all so much for being here this morning. Since we got a small crew with us, be interested, where y'all in from? From San Antonio? San Antonio, no, Abilene. Where y'all in from? What's that? Hilton Head. Excellent. What area of the industry are y'all in? Retail. Excellent. Where are you from? From here. Awesome. Welcome. San Antonio. Excellent. And then Abilene as well. Excellent. Well, my name is Coleman Hemp. I am the president of the Texas Hemp Industries Association. Following the 2014 Texas Republican Party convention. And really, still to this day, I have yet to go to a more energetic Republican convention. It was about 10,000 delegates there, and that was really the first year at the grassroots level that we really saw the discussion around medicinal marijuana, around cannabis at large, and certainly hemp. In 2014, we were able to help to get hemp onto the Republican Party platform, which was that first political starting point for this issue in the state. After the convention, and really kind of, I was inspired, one, by all of the things I had learned that hemp could do from that convention, but also, Hempill is my last name, and admittedly, I was pretty ignorant of all of the things around hemp. Read The Emperor Wears No Clothes, sitting on top of a module builder in West Texas, crushing cotton, and there was no lobby, there was no real broader voice in the state on the issue, and this is something that is a continuation of something I'm very passionate about as it relates to functional medicine, complementary alternative medicine that we have also been advocates for with the Texas Medical Board and with the legislature, really going back to 2013. Our mission is to be very much focused as a member-based association to provide the value back to our members through connecting people, through effective advocacy in the Capitol, and in promotion. We're really excited to be relaunching the Texas Hemp Industries Association through our collaboration with the National Hemp Association. The National Hemp Association has been headed by Jeff Whaling and Erica Stark for a number of years. They've been very effective advocates in Washington, D.C., are able to work very well on both sides of the aisle. Jeff's background he's a dual Canadian citizen and Pennsylvania citizen, so very much been very involved in a lot of the large capital raises in the space, and really he's been a great statesman. He's certainly been the gentleman from Pennsylvania and helped to take our message on different issues specific to Texas and other states to that national level. We have formed a standing committee of hemp organizations. So this is essentially a number of different state organizations from all over the country that are able to have a discussion, to have a round table to discuss what are the most pertinent issues to the industry right now as they relate to the USDA, to the DEA, and to the executive branch. And as this coalition has been forming, it's been incredibly helpful to be able to point to the over 75,000 different members that this group represents as a whole. We're getting to this kind of precipice, this point where we do have the numbers to be a considerable voting bloc that people in DC are listening to. So a good portion of my talk today is really going to be related to policy issues here in Texas. I'm sure many of y'all have read through HB 1325, and 2020 was our first growing year. We had a lot of delays. Licensing opened up March 16th of 2020, and so a lot of farmers had crops that flowered really early. A lot of farmers had crops that drowned out in certain parts of the state due to those spring rains. and replanting later in the year, we're drought out. So we still have yet to have the best opportunity to see what Texas is fully capable of on the growing side. One of the biggest policy issues that I think has been the biggest hot button issue in the hemp industry nationwide has been in relation to total THC. In HB 1325, our Texas Department of Agriculture was tasked to develop rules in conjunction and in line with what the USDA has put out. The USDA put out their interim final rule October 31st, 2019, and in that they created a new definition for hemp by adding the term total THC. Total THC, for those that aren't familiar, is adding THCA to Delta 9, and by doing that, they're actually creating a more restrictive definition of hemp at 0.3 total THC, where the statute, both at the federal level and then in the state of Texas, specifically outlines Delta 9 THC. Fortunately, we've received a lot of support at the federal level through letters from Senator Wyden and Senator Merkley out of Oregon. They were co-sponsors of the 2018 Farm Bill and the different hemp-specific provisions. And then also, and I think you'll see this much more pronounced this year, Senator Rand Paul out of Kentucky has also been a big proponent of changing this total THC to 1% and is actually looking at introducing legislation to clean this up. Also in that legislation, a lot of the pre-harvest testing requirements and all of these very small windows that we've been given, the 15-day harvest window prior to harvest, would go away, and we would move towards testing the finished products like we do with many other products that are out there. So really, really important part to this. This is so important because many people don't understand that the 0.3 designation goes back to the 70s, to a study that was really looking at the cannabinoid concentration in the leaves of the plants. And in that same study, they recognized that the flowering parts of the plant would range generally between 0.4 and 1% THCA, in total THC. So we just need to be put in the realm of reality with a strong confidence that we're not promoting any kind of intoxicating products. We can, with full confidence, say this is hemp, this has been the same hemp that we've been selling successfully over the last 5 years, that through the millions of units that have been sold nationwide haven't demonstrated any harm. These are safe products. So the next problem specific to Texas is currently the Texas Department of Agriculture is required that all starter plants from greenhouses be tested and shipped with a manifest prior to moving from a greenhouse into a field. Well, for all of us that understand this plant, we know that there's virtually no cannabinoids in hemp or any cannabis plant of any variety in that starter stage. Every one of those tests came back negative, but it's an education that law enforcement still needs to understand. There was one case this year where a company that had their hemp handler's license in the state of Texas, licensed as cultivators in the state, purchase starts from Colorado, have their invoice, have every little bit of this, are stopped outside of Amarillo. Law enforcement says, so you don't have your proper paperwork, although I know that no one in law enforcement had ever seen this before. This is a really good point of education for your local law enforcement, engaging that there's no cannabinoids in starts. So this really comes down to finished products as it stands right now, pre-harvest testing. There are provisions that exist to make sure that these products are not over the specified limit. The next issue that we've faced is the Texas Department of Agriculture really threw a lot of pressure from people outside the state, different seed companies, put together a approved varieties list of seeds. My biggest concern around an approved varieties list, as opposed to a list that is more of a vetted list of seed growers, they're providing information like feminization rates, gene stability, the latitude of production, suggested planting dates. That would have been my suggestion, because just because you have Suver Haze or someone has Suver Haze, it's not all the same. You really need to know where those seeds are coming from. And I would like to see TDA move towards a number of different voluntary registrations from different seed companies that are able to post specified data, manufacturers, different people, similarly to what we've been seeing in Tennessee. There's been a number of departments of agriculture that, again, have put these voluntary registrations to where you can be this forthright company to be able to put your information and clarify any issues as they relate to transportation over state lines. This is really important. And just another thing to highlight on seeds. As I said earlier, we got started really late last year. And I see this consistently within the hemp industry as people begin asking the questions that they should be asking too late. Really right now is the point that people should begin really doing the due diligence around what seeds they're going to be planting. If you had a successful year this last year, certainly, grow upon your successes, but I would, again, even based upon what you did last year, variety trials are going to be so important, and that really begins right now. There's many areas of the state, particularly, I would say south of really the hill country, that can accommodate a planting date of really mid-February to mid-March is when they plant a lot of their crops. You're looking for that optimum soil temperature, and really at the point that you're past your last freeze is when you need to begin getting into the ground. So soil preparation, understanding your amendments, getting your soil tests right now, getting your water tests right now is critically important. So the next issue that we're dealing, and this is more of a national issue, but it also affects Texas as well, is the DEA proposed new rules related to their authority to regulate processors. If the DEA was awarded this authority by the court, and this is currently being litigated, they would essentially shut down a lot of the midstream processing necessary to produce compliant CBD products that are less than 0.3% Delta-9. So what I'm talking about is the process from taking flower, processing that into crude, and this crude material is generally anywhere from 40 to 70% CBD, taken from plants that were 10 to 15% CBD. So you have that concentration. And you're also taking these plants that are around 0.3 THC, and you're also going to have that proportional concentration. So a lot of crude products can range anywhere from 1 to 5% THC. After winterization, you have a further concentration. After distillation or remediation, you have a further concentration, or I guess through distillation. And so from nation as a not for sale, not for consumption, in process good. What I would like to see, and what many are proposing, is regulations very similar to what you see with other commodities done by the FDA. A really good example of this would be fish oil. So base fish oil, processing your fish down can be totally fine. All of the testing that's done on that material finds negligible amounts of any kind of contaminants. If you take that fish oil and distill it, you can have higher concentrations of contaminants like mercury. To define something as a contaminant is an acknowledgement that that's a contaminant to something that's not a contaminant, and that there has to be a process of remediation allowed and a process to denature, to destroy that contaminant in the appropriate way. Mercury, similar to THC, is a contaminant and is also a controlled substance if you have that product in high enough concentration. So there are processes that exist going from agriculture and departments of agriculture into further processing with the FDA. Again, this is an opportunity for voluntary registration with our Texas Department of Agriculture and DSHS for these not for sale, not for consumption products. If Texas was able to expand upon language that we were able to write in that does allow farmers whose crops go above the specified limit to process, dry, grind their material to be at that appropriate level for finished goods below 0.3. And we have no contest at all that all finished products have to be below that 0.3 statutory limit. If we're able to expand upon that language by really talking about remediation and adding remediation into that language and just that single word that can be expanded upon, we'll be in a really good place. If we allowed for the transport of this crude material, this winterized material that has yet to be remediated, that's one of the largest bottlenecks that exists within the hemp industry right now. Many companies invested heavily in processors to create crude material, either through supercritical CO2 or ethanol, and they have found that they can produce much more crude than they can provide winterized and remediated material. Being able to fill those gaps as new markets come on like Texas that are closer to the consumer market and be able to import from Colorado, from Oregon, from California, from Kentucky, these materials would be a boon for the state. I think that's probably one of the greatest opportunities that exists and is one of the more free market approaches to how we address a lot of the issues people are facing in having product that they still can't sell. So this goes back to my earlier point. HB 1325 states that hemp is not an adulterant for human or animal consumption. This was a huge piece of language that we were able to get into our law and really provides somewhat of a 10th Amendment approach and protection for the Texas hemp industry. There's been a number of articles touting that Texas is really positioned right now to be one of the better states for formulation in food products. And what we would be requesting from our legislature is a joint resolution. So this would be a joint resolution between the House and Senate that essentially is a request that they're able to send to Washington, D.C. That we would like to request research related to hemp grains use as animal feed. We'd like for animal feed, poultry, swine, bovine, equine, there's a number of studies that have been done. We'd like to see peer review. We want to have, as stakeholders, an ability to direct the methodology, the plan of research. It's going to be a critical element to see hemp truly introduced as a rotation crop for the grain side. Grain has to have this high volume, low cost consumer market. I believe around 40% of all of the corn, the over 90 million acres of corn in the United States, goes to feed livestock. Same thing with soybeans. We have to find that person. And this also would relate to the FDA regulating cannabinoids, similar to different food products. They need that money to push those things forward. I think up to this point, the FDA has received around $6 million for hemp research, and during that time frame, they discovered that there's this term called broad spectrum. It's kind of the broad understanding of their findings there, so we need some more push there. Right now, the FDA is really neglected to provide any direction for the industry. Again, we were pushing for the FDA to provide more research dollars to be able to do different studies on how CBD, how CBG interacts with your SSRI inhibitors, with Prozac. There's still a lot of work to be done, and I certainly don't shy away from that research. We need to have a better understanding of what impact on the liver different cannabinoids have, but we need to straightway reject a lot of the research that the FDA has put forward citing a study out of Arkansas feeding mice about a third of their body weight in CBD. It kind of beckons us back to this point where the DEA and the University of Mississippi doing studies on cannabis, saying that cannabis causes brain damage. Find the negative, to recognize the positive things, but to do it in an appropriate way. And I think as we get closer to dosage, and have this guidance from the FDA, the market will explode. At the point that the FDA opens that up, companies like Coca-Cola, companies like Kellogg's, and all of their different products are now open to providing these different products that they don't have access to right now. Some really encouraging things on this topic that are happening is in New York, really at the behest and with a big promotion from Unilever, which is a huge co-packer in the United States, have begun creating rules within their state that have set a dosage limit for individual products at 25 milligrams per individual product, and for multi-unit capsules, chocolate bars, something that has a larger volume, no more than 3,000 total milligrams. I think this is very reasonable. Again, this is something that we would love to see Texas further expand upon with the language that they have right now as it relates to adulterants, and push on the FDA and the federal government to come in line with the leadership that Texas is providing. All right, so another big issue that has been a very popular and the Department of State Health Services have proposed rules that will prohibit the retail sale of smokable hemp products. Now, currently, HB 1325 states that there is a prohibition on the manufacturing and processing of products into smokable hemp. But there is no, in statute, designation that prohibits the retail sale. A lot of the issues that exist around this, and this is an issue that's been litigated, those rules went into effect in August. Immediately following those rules, a large retailer that did about $15 million in smokable hemp processing and manufacturing in the state filed suit because they had demonstrated over $1 million worth of damage and had to move all of their equipment and all their employees to Oklahoma. Other companies were able to testify that this had a big impact on their retail sales. 50% of my business right now is selling these products. And so fortunately, right now, the courts have allowed a temporary restraining order on that rule until February 2nd, which puts us right into the legislative session. So to some degree, that's been a bit of a punt. And it's incumbent upon us to show that this is something that's in court right now. If we don't get resolution on this issue in the state, we have no other option but to exhaust all remedies to us and to continue to press this out in the courts. It's a great opportunity, and that generally does get a lot of politicians' attention. This is something that's happening. We need you to clarify and fix this. Ways that we can do that, and I would really direct people to contact the two bill authors. Tracy King was the bill author out of Uvalde, to get his position on this, and certainly to express your position on the issue. And then also Senator Charles Perry in the Senate, to really clarify what the legislative intent was on this. And the best way to clarify that legislative intent is to change the law. Senator Perry's office has told me that they have a cleanup bill that's in the works, that's currently in with Legislative Counsel. Legislative Counsel is kind of the in-house group of attorneys at the Texas Capitol that take the language, apply it to the particular statute, and it does generally take some time to get those drafts back. But I've also, in a number of circumstances, seen that process go slow. kind of delay. So this isn't our top priority. Kind of get it back to us when you need to. We need to see a draft of that soon. Bills began being introduced in Texas shortly following our last election in November. A lot of bills will continue to be filed prior to session that begins on January 12th. Now is one of the best times to have these discussions. If you have relationships with your state representatives and state senators, many of them are home during the holidays. If they're having their town halls, definitely bring this issue up. This is a super important one to address. Some stirrings that have happened and some proposals by some, although we have not seen this introduced yet, is to enact legislation that will require smokable hemp products to have a 21-year-old age limit and to be taxed at the same rate as tobacco. The justification on taxes, which I'm generally averse to all taxes, I think, is that smoking products is a use of least necessity. That there are other ways to consume different products that could be potentially less harmful. And the real carrot that comes with this is Texas is facing truly an unprecedented session as it relates to our budget. So the Texas economy and the Texas over $72 billion annual budget for the state is mostly predicated on $52 a barrel oil, which we've been far under for a long time. We're looking at many, many billions of dollars in deficits. If our legislature starts to recognize that this is a revenue generator for the state, the power of moving in that direction, I think, will expand outside of the hemp industry. I think if that's the foundational point that we're lobbying, that this is a revenue generator, this is a positive item in the state, it will bring a whole lot more merit to the broader cannabis discussions that are going on. This item was somewhat addressed earlier. Shipping manifests. Right now, we have a lot of language in our Texas law that requires a shipping manifest be requested and be provided by the Texas Department of Agriculture prior to facility, drying facility to an extraction facility. And so you're having to put in a request to the Department of Agriculture that can take several days for that release to come through, which when you get into the planting time in particular, you don't have time to waste. Every single day is critically important. You have your best opportunity for success during a specified natural time window. And it's redundant. Right now, farmers have to get a handler's license to transport products in the state. You have to get a grower's license to cultivate in the state. You have to have a processor's license to process and manufacture different items. If people are operating appropriately, this is documentation that they will have with them when they're transporting their products. If someone doesn't have those items with them and they get pulled over by law enforcement, then there's different consequences that at this point are really more administrative because this isn't a criminal item anymore. Hemp is removed from the Controlled Substance Act. What I would like to see us move to is rather than the situation that I explained earlier where this guy has completely licensed products, has starts that are seized, we're going to just have to seize all this until we can tell you what it is. We have to move more to a sample and release, particularly for those that do have all the appropriate paperwork. If you have that handler's license, if you have that grower's license, we have your address, we know where you are. Sample piece of material, send it off to a testing lab. If something comes back nefarious, then we can address that at that issue, and we know who that person is, and it would be the cost in time associated with this needs to go away. I think this is something that we certainly will see cleaned up this next session. So as I said earlier, right now in Texas, bills are being introduced. We need to continue to remain vigilant and press on those bill authors to ask where those bills are. When are we going to get those back, and when are we going to be able to review drafts of those? Texas legislative session begins January 12th. Filing deadline for bills to be introduced is up to the 16th day of the 140-day session. So, and I think I have that written wrong. So 16 days after the session begins. So generally the first part of February is your last opportunity to get bills introduced. The temporary restraining order is in place until February 2nd. This is an item that is being played out in the courts, but many times I've seen what happens in the court is subject to the court of public opinion leading up to that. This is a lawsuit that all of your representatives and senators should be aware of, and they should be motivated to change this, because this is not an isolated case. And I think we've been very clear as an industry that this affects all of us. And I really appreciate the work that Spencer and Ritter, Chelsea Spencer, and Yetter Coleman, another attorney group here in Houston, have done on the issue. Really remarkable job on the litigation up to this point. The USDA's interim final rule, they opened up for another comment period this year after not really responding to any of the comments in the earlier period back in the earlier part of 2020. Their final rule, I've been told, has now been sent to the Office of Management and Budget. It's essentially the agency that provides the report to the executive branch, that does have some latitude to determine the legality of a lot of the proposed final rules. What we're hearing back from Bill Richmond, who's over the hemp program for the USDA, is he feels confident that the industry will be happy with a lot of the modifications that have been made to the final rule. We don't know until we can see it. Again, this is another item that you can be requesting from your federal senators. We should be hearing, we should be requesting this from Cornyn's office and Cruz's office. Unfortunately, and if I ever forget the providence and being involved in this, it's just so clear. I was so fortunate when we got started in this that both my state senator as well as my congressman were the chair of their respective ag committees. We continue pushing Mike Conaway as another critical person. He was not up for re-election this year. He's on his way out. Call his office. Make this the last request that we have from him to get a copy of where that final rule is from OMB. The DEA, and I have their interim final rule in quotations. They didn't really recognize it in their language as an interim final rule. They said that this is more of a clarification, and we already have this authority. That's been in question. Recently, there were provisions that are placed in the budget that have been in past budgets to address the DEA that state that no funds can be used to prohibit the transportation, sale, or use of hemp in or out of state in which it originated in. So no funds can be given to prohibit these things. And so that is a direct shot at the DEA, that they don't have the authority to move forward with this. The USDA in their interim final rule had the DEA listed, I think, over 60 times. The DEA that's not mentioned once in the 2018 Farm Bill. So we really need to hold the line there. And certainly happy to work with the DEA, but I don't know how many of y'all are familiar with the proverb of the scorpion and the frog. A scorpion and a frog are sitting on one side of the stream. The scorpion can't swim. He said, "Mr. Frog, let me ride on your back so we can get across the river." And he said, "No." He said, You'll sting me and we'll both drown." He said, "No, I won't do that." And so he asked him again, and finally convinces his frog to swim him across the river. The scorpion stings them. They're both floating down. So why did you do that? It's because it's in my nature. And I've been told by a very wise person that when someone tells you their name, and their name is the Drug Enforcement Agency, that's what they're going to do, and that's who they are. Totally respect our law enforcement. I think the DEA's job as it relates to fentanyl and the opium epidemic is a huge issue, and we support cracking down on a lot of those things. Hemp is not this issue at all, and they need to go away from that. I don't think the DEA wants to mess with it, but we have to always remain vigilant on that. Last, so the National Hemp Association and the standing committee that our organization is also a part of has put forward a request for a federal advisory committee. I think this is possibly essentially said that, the 2018 Farm Bill was fantastic, and we really support a lot of the language, but unfortunately, the language and the intent of the 2018 Farm Bill has been tainted by the USDA and their rules around these new definitions, harvest windows, the finished products side of this. The issue in advancing hemp has not been the plant, it has not been the farmers or the willingness of the markets right now, it's been regulatory issues. And that's why supporting the Texas HIA, the National Hemp Association, is still critically important. We can't get complacent to this idea that we've already won and that this is all rectified. We've stayed ahead right now, we need to continue moving in that direction. A federal advisory committee, if you look up a FACA committee, is essentially a group that is able to address Congress, to put together a congressional report, having stakeholders within the industry that have some level of authority, again, to direct how research is done, how are these different studies planned and organized, is very important, because we need to gain more authority in the data that we know already exists, and to see that pushed by these different agencies. As stated earlier, crops that were planted late in March of this last year, still having issues with genetic instability in a lot of cases that I've talked to people about, different issues with hermaphroditing plants, and then also early flowering. Both of those issues can be very closely tied to latitude, and also a lot of the different extreme conditions that we have in this state. The temperatures, the lack of water can all impact these things, and so continuing to take a cautious approach, but expanding upon the successes from last year, continuing to do pilot crops to get the data that's going to be necessary long-term to get insurance for your crops and to get more borrowing opportunities, banking financing. Right now, people need to be preparing their fields and their greenhouses. If you're trying to hit a mid-February to mid-March planting in the state, and there are some people that are starting to pop seeds now. Popping seeds in January in a greenhouse controlled environment is not out of bounds at all. People need to be aware that we're working on a couple months earlier than what we were last year, and we don't want to duplicate a lot of the problems that we saw from last year with late planting. All right, so good on time. So where are we going? What really needs to happen to see hemp advance in Texas? On the fiber side, which we have not addressed in this talk up to this point. One, we need to see a successful 2021 crop. We have still yet to see the full potential of hemp cultivation in the state. Your consumer markets, you're not going to have the data necessary to facilitate large infrastructure growth. I'd really caution people from moving into this direction of building a huge extraction facility before they know that they can grow the plant and before they know where they're going to sell it. Where I've seen success from companies are those that are really taking the finished product, whether that's an insulation, a plywood product, a flooring product, car parts, taking that finished product and moving backwards with layers of intent from your car manufacturer, from your large construction industries to facilitate the infrastructure necessary to build it. And you're only going to build that as long as you know that you're in a geographical area where you have a feedstuff and you have good relationships there. So moving in that direction and with that mindset, I think is important. So with a successful crop in 2021, we're going to be getting more data that, again, is going to be moving us towards insurance. Crop insurance is an item that's really handled on a county by county basis. I have some friends that were the first canola growers in our county. It took him 3 years in order to get enough information related to what his yields were and what the value of his crop was in order to receive insurance. Insurance is generally a prerequisite for a lot of bank financing. And so even if you're doing an acre, you're being able to provide a foundation for greater security, which doesn't exist for the industry right now. It does in limited capacities, and there are some hemp-specific insurers out there, but that kind of more traditional FSA, federal-backed insurance is not available in Texas right now. We have, with that standing committee with the NHA, put forth requests for federal block grants for infrastructure and processing. I think we've all recognized that there's been a critical lack of processing capacity as it relates to fiber and grain. And again, until we address the issue with animal consumption, I think we're still going to be a ways off on grain. But at the point we get there, having the backing of the federal government that has been spending trillions of dollars over this last year, putting it in an area that has a real tangible return on investment, and without a doubt is doing nothing but growing. So they say the stock market always goes up. Hemp will always soon. A federal bill, like I said earlier, has been introduced, is in the process of being introduced by Senator Rand Paul. This also would remove the requirement to test those products prior to the finished good. That would be a huge step forward. Kind of broadly, and outside of the policy issues, I think one of the most exciting things that happened in 2019, 2020 was the introduction of CBG. New varieties, new genetics that are very low in THC, very low in CBD. From a compliance on the growing side, certainly opened up a lot of doors for farmers. My company has been very involved in a lot of initial research as it relates to CBGA. And CBG. And what we found through 2020 is there was quite a bit slower adoption of these things. People are still just getting their minds around CBD. That's grown really quickly. I remember in 2018, I remember the numbers being around 3% of the U.S. population regularly consumed hemp products. By the end of 2019, that increased to around 15%. Over 50% of the U.S. population takes at least one pharmaceutical drug per year of some kind. So there's still this huge gap of a consumer market that hemp has yet to reach. CBG has been a more expensive item, but I think we're starting to see a lot of the acres level off, comparable CBG to CBD. This year there were some successful crops of fiber grown in Texas, several hundred acres. The Texas Hemp Growers Association, Tillery Sims, and a lot of those North Texas labs west of the Mississippi, and really one of the only ones there in that area. I'm really excited to see where that continues to move, and if that's going to facilitate an expansion on the infrastructure that they have. To talk just a little bit about what we're looking at in regard to the association. So as was stated earlier, we've been around since 2015, very good relationships with the Department of State Health Services, Texas Department of Agriculture, and on the other side of legalization, our biggest focus is how can we provide value to our membership, with the goal long-term to be as closely connected to a Farm Bureau type model. Farm Bureau, to address the size of the state, has a model pretty similar to this. You can find a representative in a Farm Bureau board that meets once a year. They have a small annual fish fry somewhere, go through the memberships, how much money was raised at the county level, and that money is remitted from the county level to the region, from the region or to the district, to the region, and then to the state. Local representation, and something that we want to continue to grow within our membership, is having representatives at every single one of those county issues. It's such a relief to find people that are from towns where different issues come up. You know, the item that I was talking about earlier in Abilene, where people had product seized, we were able in about 30 minutes to call and find out where the sheriff went to church, what he ate that day. You know, we're able to clarify things pretty quickly in that way, and that only comes from individuals from those areas. You know, what we ask from people that are interested in being county coordinators is to have relationships with all of your elected officials, and I think that there's a real strategy in the order in which you pursue those different meetings. You know, I encourage people to start with their state representative's office, then their state senator's office, then to their county commissioners, then to their school boards, their city councils, if that's a relevant group around your business. And once you've had all of these conversations, and you can point to being forthright with all clarity on what hemp is and its usefulness. We've broken out the state into 6 different regions. These are to accommodate the population areas, and then also the different climates in the state. So north, West Texas, central, south, southeast, more Houston area, and then northeast, and again to accommodate the huge populations and the really important markets that exist there. Again, this is a model that Farm Bureau follows. They elect regional directors that sit on their state board, and now really with the relationship that we have with the NHA, we want to have a democratic process of who that representative is for the state as it relates to hemp policy at large. Let's see here. We have begun working very closely and been offered a lot of benefits from a number of different companies. One of them is Ionization Labs. They're based in Austin, Texas. They're one of the only labs, they're members of the National Association of State Departments of Agriculture, also the American Association of Official Analytical Chemists, and their cannabis-related and specific testing. They only do potency testing. That's really kind of the niche. So this is not a substitute for all of the testing needs as it relates to pesticides, heavy metals that other labs are doing really well. But at different membership levels, they have offered a complimentary test, Another item that we're working on is to provide members weather data. We're working with this group, ClimateCan, that will take 25 different points of weather data every 5 minutes. And we're able to then take this data and connect it to your soil tests, your water tests, to your potency tests. And the value of that data over time, for you to be able to identify what you did right, grow upon that, package that for sale, or to develop IP around your grow is critically important. Also working very closely with TPS Labs. So TPS Labs has been around since 1938, one of the oldest labs in the state. Their real focus is on soil micronutrient testing. They do water testing and also plant analysis. The process is actually being absorbed by your plants. They're amazing at this, and it's been interesting, and it took a while to connect the dots, but I've had friends that were growers in Northern California. I've had specialty vegetable crops out of Virginia that have all used this lab. TPS has been around the hemp industry for about 13 years, starting with a lot of the fiber and grain varieties out of Canada. Our national and providing this benefit to our members is really our attempt at pointing people to best practices. People aren't getting this base level data for their grow. You're really steering the ship without a rudder. You need to understand what these baselines are. Last, so we've also partnered with the Texas Hemp Reporter. All of our members will receive free magazines. We're very quickly growing the distribution of this outside of the state. Now have magazines going to Oklahoma, Arkansas, Louisiana, and New Mexico. And through this partnership with the National Hemp Association, a lot of these real contributing editors in these different regions hope to push out that to people all over the country. And I know a lot of people think that the print media is dead, but if there is any one group that still reads magazines, it's certainly farmers and ranchers. And so really great tool to market and advertise. I've been very impressed with the content and the diversity of voices that have been in the magazine, and we're really, really proud to be partnering with them. So yeah, you can visit us. Our website is txhia.org, and just to kind of follow up, I believe my hour is coming up, and I don't have internet, so I'm not going to show you the video that I was going to show, but visit us. We're very hopeful, and in 2020, I think hemp has still been one of the more optimistic and hopeful items. All of the conflicts that have happened this year, the community, wherever people stand politically, wherever people are, have still been growing and strong within the hemp community. It's been said many, many times that I don't know if hemp can save the world, but it's one of the only things that can. I've certainly seen this to be an item that provides a platform for many other important issues as it relates to social equity, to our economy as a whole, and we're really encouraged to be here. If y'all have any questions, please visit us. We have a booth. Please come grab a magazine from the Texas Hemp Reporter. And again, you can visit us at txhia.org. And with that, I'd be happy to take any questions. Yes, sir.
Data collection, are you guys doing anything? The TPA is, overburdened in getting data sets in.
Yeah, so the question was, excuse me, around data sets in the industry. So the Texas Department of Agriculture has a list, outlining how many acres were planted I believe the number's around 5,400 acres in the state. Had a little over, yes sir, a little over 1,000 licensees within the state. Broadly though, I don't think there's this aggregation of data of what the average CBD content of all producers in the state is, or what regions of the state that is. And again, we want to be a resource for the industry to help provide you the companies that can provide that data. And voluntarily, people's data is their data, but a lot of people understand that sharing that data, particularly with their neighbors close by, only benefits them further. Other groups that have been doing a lot of work on this issue is Texas A&M. Calvin Trossel with Texas A&M has been the head over their hemp program, and Ionization Labs recently has entered into a multi-year deal with Texas A&M, providing HPLCs, analytical equipment, at several of the different research experiment stations in the state. And so those will be good resources, getting more testing opportunities to folks from authoritative groups like that. I think will move us in that direction. So, but we are still very, very more of a what? I'm sorry. Yeah.
Earlier in your talk, you suggested that TDA needed a more robust seed program, and we've been made to understand that the genetic diversity in the U.S. is relatively not so great. So, from world leader genetic banks, is TDA willing to invest, or an organization willing to invest into real-world evidence-based research to support different genetics from outside the state for Texas? Because there's 6 pages of seeds approved in Texas, and not any of them have real Texas conditions.
Yep, absolutely. And thank you for that question. I absolutely support that. And so the first part of that is that Texas Farmers, TDA, is partnering with licensed seed growers. Right now, we don't have a seed licensing per se for cultivators that are growing for seed in the state, like they do in Colorado, like they do in Oregon. Those states are following the American Seed Association's directions, and then IOSCA. IOSCA is oh goodness, I always get tied up on this abbreviation, but the official seed certifiers. Our IOSCA representative in the state of Texas is Dr. Baltensberger with Texas A&M Soil and Crop Science, and then also the Texas Department of Agriculture. There are processes in place right now as it relates to seed certification. This last year, there was really only one company that was eligible and that actually participated in that program, Sunbelt Hemp, out of really Colorado and Georgia. That company has done the different certification trials out of Colorado and Georgia. Is what made them eligible to bring that in to begin looking at and starting the process of certifying seed in the state. IOSCA has a very thought out process, and to answer your question about seeds coming from other countries and different limitations that we face because of the 0.3 designation, I absolutely would support that. In 2015, we had a provision in that introduced language that research. One of the huge advantages that Colorado and Oregon have had is they were able to operate with high THC genetics, different varieties that they were able to crossbreed to maintain the same yields and best attributes that people are looking for in growing, while also maintaining compliance. I believe Sid Miller recently has made some statements in relation to this. That would be a huge advancement for us in the state. I think at this point, with our our legislation in the state, there can be some room for that. I think some different research provisions should be made, and we do need to and I would suggest that Texas begin looking at licensing seed growers. Seedsmen really are held to a higher level of scrutiny. If you spend bad money in seed, you're going to be spending bad money on every other part of the process. Super important part of it. Yep. Excellent. Well, I believe that is it. Thank you all so much. I really appreciate the time. I'm around all day, and we'll talk soon.